Hi, I'm B.B. Johnson, and I'm here to introduce you to two individuals whose work I've known for quite a long time. Richard Scott Newman, 35 years. Brian Newell, 25 years. I'll give you a very brief introduction to them, and then for reasons that I'm now frantically trying to put together, I volunteered to conduct this, to moderate, even worse, this conversation between these two. I should have known better. But I'm here, I'm committed. Richard Newman was born in the Bronx, New York. He attended the Bronx High School of Science, got through that in 3 years. That's code for he's smart. He went to Cornell, engineering physics, entered at age 16. He was asked to leave at age 18. Now you have to remember,
We're so alike.
this is the 60s. And what my favorite commentator on things to do with the 60s, Hank Gilprin, said, it's the height of fiddle and diddle.
Civil what?
The height of fiddle and diddle. The 60s, Richard. All right. Well, somehow Richard found...
Was I there?
Somehow Richard found his way to the School of American Craftsmen and the Rochester Institute of Technology. He had, when we met him in the late 70s, just finished an intense period of musical instrument making, the banjo in particular. And he had, as far as his furniture future, 4 teachers. Can you imagine this? Here they are. Wendell Castle, Bill Kaiser, Jerry Osgood, and James Krenoff. That's kind of the heavy hitters. Despite that lineup, Richard managed to cut his own path, and he produced, in the period that we knew him, have known him, a brilliant body of technically unrivaled work. He called it neo-neoclassical. In his presentation after this conversation, he'll show you some of this work that I think stands as just what we mean when we talk about extreme furniture. It's at the edge of what's possible. Richard maintains his shop in Rochester, New York. Now, Brian Newell, for those who heard his presentation previously, know he is from Flint, Michigan, and actually it turns out that plays a very important part in his life. He left it, although he did go to one of the University of Michigan campuses. I don't know which one, I can't remember, but he was asked to leave. I don't know. But, you know, part of my goal in this conversation is to reveal the common ground between these two, because when you look at their furniture, you probably scratch your head and say, what did she have in her mind to put these two people together? Okay, we'll learn. But Brian found his way to the College of the Redwoods in the late 1980s, and Jim Krenoff. I remember Krenoff's call. He said, well, there's this young man who's shown up, and, you know, if we can manage to keep him here and interest him, he might do some interesting things. Well, Newell left after a year, but he did fulfill his teacher's prophecy. He has gone on to make some mighty interesting things. Brian maintains a shop, a studio in Mendocino, California, and he also has one in Atsugi, Japan. Now, despite his sketchy academic background, he has managed to be the recipient of 2 Wingate Foundation artist residencies, one in 2010 at the College of Arts and Design, State University of New York, Purchase, and then most recently at San Diego State University. So, We'll probably talk. I would like for the conversation to go on for a good hour. I can't hog them from you, so in the last part of it, the last 15 minutes, we need to open the floor to your questions. And let's go.
Chairs squeak a lot, so if you're really irritated by that, just let us know.
Mine doesn't.
Yeah. Let's figure out what that means.
So this is so I can keep an eye on them.
What do you weigh, Brian?
I'd like to begin with your thoughts on some words that aren't really in common usage. Perfection, excellence, and then let's fold in the issue of doubt, or as Charles Peirce, the American pragmatist, calls it descriptively, the irritation of doubt. When does doubt enter into your mind, and what stage in your work? Richard,
What?
do you consider yourself a perfectionist? I'm gonna bundle my questions because I've got, after all these years.
I'm first.
You are. Because you are the mature one.
Before we go any further,
Yeah.
I would like to point out some irony. Here we are at a Furniture Society meeting,
Oh, no.
and I've got my glass of water on a chair. Where's the friggin' table? It's gone. Okay, what were you asking, Bibi?
Well, my thought was about perfection in your work, and do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
No,
You do not.
I don't.
Isn't
I
it funny?
don't. I never have. I've been called a perfectionist. I don't. I don't believe that there is perfection. The only things that are perfect in my mind are flowers, little children, and occasionally the posterior of a woman. But furniture is never perfect. What it can be, though, is it can be as good as you can possibly make it. And so if you were to ask me what I was, I would say I'm a person who doesn't compromise, and we all compromise, no, but I'm willing to go as far as I possibly can, maybe even a little bit beyond, to get what it is that I want. But I don't know if that's being a perfectionist or not. But I never thought of myself as a perfectionist.
Well, wouldn't you acknowledge that it might be easier to attain perfection in musical instrument, like a banjo, than a piece of furniture? I don't know that I've ever met or seen or encountered or experienced a perfect piece of furniture. But
I think we're at semantics. It's the same thing. I think we talk about any object, and you bring to it what you decide you need to, and you take it as far as you can. And no, there's never a perfect answer. Oh God, no. Especially if you ask the musicians, they're always looking for a slightly different sound, or okay, it's really good up the neck. So no. There is no perfection, and the attainment of perfection is a fool's errand, as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. And I may have been a fool for a major part of my career, but I think perfection is just a terrible concept. Who invented perfection? Where's this come from?
Mm-hmm. Japan. Pretty sure.
well, Brian, I don't think of you in terms of perfection, although I know for you it's terribly important. It's important that you do the work well. I know that. And my question has to, you touched on it certainly in your presentation this morning, because where do these ideas, these insect-like, arthropod-like, complex furniture forms come from? From here, to the realization. I've never seen a drawing. Do you draw? How do you translate this stuff?
I have to do a sketch like to get the proportions, but a lot of it is I'm better off closing my eyes than trying to take a blank piece of paper and explore. I just don't explore on paper. I don't learn anything from paper. I'm better off just focusing a lot. If there's a small kernel of an idea, just to let the movie play. And it's almost like that. You know, close the eyes and you can shift one. It's almost like looking at a computer screen, you know, where you can see it shift in space. And that's usually enough to excite me to get the wood out. And it's generally the most expensive wood that I have because, well, it's something about incentive. You know, we talk about that at the Krenov School too, where, oh, you don't want to start out with something which is so precious because then what if you mess it up? And to me, you never try as hard if you don't have something at stake. So my method of making furniture is to probably keep the anxiety level or the level of excitement as high as possible, which means unpredictability. It's a performance in a way.
Okay.
And the piece itself might end up as a byproduct of the performance.
Richard, do you improvise?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you have your movie, I have similar stuff. I have them in the shower a lot. And are your movies realistic, though? So some of my movies are like Escher drawings. There's just no way. And do your movies actually, they always work out?
They don't. They're pretty clear. If the idea is right, they're pretty clear. And then it's the technical aspects of putting this thing together. But it's an impression and it's a mood. It's almost like a mood. And then you help to set the mood for the rest of the piece. It's like setting the key for a symphony. You know, there's sad keys and there's happy keys, and you start that, and then you build, and you see what you're doing, and if it's possible to change it as you go along, it's nice. So it's definitely improvisation. It's improvisation. So I get the minimum amount of information that I need to begin, and after that, it's all about holding on. It's about not. I don't want to say not giving up, but it's just like the piece we have to find out what this thing is going to look like, basically. We don't know until we get it. And that comes down to the problem of, well, how do you sustain life in the meantime? And that's a big issue, which maybe we'll talk about later.
Richard, what do you think about, with all of your technical ability, your jigging and improvisation? Is that a part in your work, or is it really so pre-thought out?
It's pretty well figured out before I even begin. Now, I wish I could work like that, but I've never been able to. Well, I could do it when, and I suppose when I show my slides, you'll see early work when I was doing subtractive work. But I found that I needed to fully understand the piece. It just wouldn't work. And I needed to work everything out before I could even begin. It may be me. I started off to be an engineer, so there's a big engineering component in everything that I do. But I need to draw it. Well, first I have the movie. There's always the movie. I don't think well on paper, but I work stuff out. Then I draw it out, and I want to look at it, I try to draw it, and I don't draw naturally or well. I learned how to draw at RIT, but it's not the part that came easily to me. And then I even found that I needed to make a mock-up. You know, you get to a certain point where you can't afford to have any turkeys. You know what I mean? It's like you get a little reputation and you're screwed. It's like you've always got to. And if it's a commission, you don't want somebody going, that's not what I was expecting. So I'll mock it up. I'll do whatever I have to do. I'll make trial parts. I want to make sure that it's going to be right. I, too, am using very expensive wood, although I always save my best wood for when I was going to grow up, which it's too late, apparently. So I still have my best wood. So everybody come to my auction when I depart. But I I need to see it. I need to know it's going to work before I invest all this time. And as Bibi mentioned, I do a lot with jigging. I do a lot with fixtures. I make tools. I make gizmos in order to realize the stuff. And then I make all these parts. And it's only at the very last minute that I assemble it and I actually see what I have. So I have no idea, sadly, until it's all put together, whether I got it right or not. And there were times when I didn't, and I take it back apart, or I don't glue it, and I remake some of the parts. Maybe that's what we're talking about as a perfectionist. Somebody would say that's a perfectionist. It wasn't that. I just wasn't happy with the work yet. I didn't want to put something out that wasn't as good as I could do. So it's very different from the way Brian works. And I think the way he works has to be more fun.
It's more adventurous. I mean, there's no place for perfection in my method. I work to a standard, which means within a piece, it's consistent. It's not like you're going to turn something over and find a void. Well, there have been a few of those, but I mean, it's fairly consistent throughout, but it's consistently rejected by someone in Japan. So, for instance, they'll spend so much time and energy to make things perfect that I've seen people have nervous breakdown. You know, I know a guy who's this far from being a national treasure making small boxes, and he's been carted off to the hospital at least once just from the pressure of having. I mean, he's third generation, and if that's perfection, then I'm not there. I'd rather juggle my ebony parts and just hold on, just cling to it, and see what happens. And I think there's such a potential for clunkers there, and in a great era, you avoid those clunkers. And in a low era, you hit them over and over, and you I've started to think, well, where am I going from here? I need to change the whole picture. Mm-hmm. I'm in between right now at this moment.
Mm-hmm. You both studied with Krenov. Any lasting impressions or influences?
Well, he didn't last long enough at RIT to form a real lasting. No, I studied with Jim the first time he came to this country, and he came to RIT, and Wendell was still there at that time, and they didn't get along, and Jim left like at Christmas time. So he wasn't there a real long time, but he tremendously influenced me. Yeah. I mean, I had read his books, and I had been studying with Wendell and Bill, and we did things a certain way in those days. We're talking about it would be 1969, I guess. Mm-hmm. And Jim came in with this whole other way of working. He was exciting. The hand tools and just his way with wood. For Wendell, the wood was a distraction from the form. Bill was a woody guy, but Wendell was like, it's all about the form. It's all about the form, and no figured wood. And Jim's like, well, it's the wood, and that really resonated for me. And he went out, and if you guys aren't fed up at the end of this, you can stay for my slides, and I'll show you the piece that I made when I was with him. But he went out and bought some 4-inch thick mahogany that he had found in a lumberyard. He was all excited. He said, we can resaw this. And I thought, this is great. So I made a piece, and I resawed it, and I hand-planed all the surfaces, and it left me with a huge impression. Yeah, I mean, he was a monumental figure in the field.
Absolutely, but for me, it was mostly about his book. It was about his words. And the first time I saw his book, I was about 16. It was winter, in the cornfield out there, and it was so disappointing. I bought some carving gouges, and then I had a little money left from the Woodcraft catalog. I went to the book section, and it said a why-to book instead of a how-to book, and that's just what a 16-year-old dark, gloomy kid needed at the time. And then ripped the package open, and there's the book, and there's this plain furniture. Up to this point, I had been looking at European stuff from like 200 years ago. So I figured things got a little more complicated since then, but he removed everything that was wonderful about that stuff. And
no, we peaked in the 18th century.
Certainly, Richard, come on, defend the 18th
No,
century.
but I wasn't there. I don't think I would have done well in the 18th century. I'd have been a serf. But the thing about Jim was he was the first one that I ever heard speak of the spiritual nature of woodworking and the spiritual nature of the wood. Before that, I mean, Wendell was interested in career, and Bill was very quiet. I didn't really know. But Jim made it exciting. And again, this is the 60s, and, I'd read The Hobbit, and I was all excited about, we were experimenting with our minds, as you can imagine. And so, it was, what he offered was incredible. Now, I was not expecting a little irascible, son of a bitch. I thought he would be more like Hans Wildenhain, who was the ceramics instructor at RIT, who was the very model of a master. He'd been through the Bauhaus. He was an early, whatever they call him back then, but like a hippie. He walked across Europe barefoot, and he was in the Zen. He had a Zen practice, but whatever, Jim had the real stuff as far as I was concerned, and there was no way not to be influenced by that.
Yeah, and once I got past the pictures and started reading what he had to say, well, I was hooked at that point, and then I needed to get to him. But it wasn't at that stage. It was like a period of pushing that out of my life and trying to be a scholar. And then right after that fell apart, Jim, he had the school out there. So it was 1 year, and I was in the room, and he was in the room, and what I made, I knew I needed him to like. And it was different than his. I was still courageous enough to put carving in there, because Jim would hate your guts if you did anything that, that he didn't. Yeah. And so there's my hero, and I'm going to put this carving on there. And I think that was the last courageous thing I ever did. And he accepted it. But as a mentor, Jim he didn't share much. He was his own world. He never felt like he was totally open to you. He walked through, but his presence meant everything because it legitimized the making of objects. And I needed that at the time. But, we learned how to sharpen a scraper, and that was about it. I mean, technically.
See, you're saying he wasn't really a mentor.
Wasn't a mentor.
No.
He was not a mentor because we didn't talk about that. It was you spend all your time around Jim trying not to go across the line of being hated. That was, And
I went across that line.
Yeah.
Later.
Toward the end of his life, the only strategy you could have was just not to see him anymore. And then it would be that we froze that last period of time because you could trip it up for nothing, for no reason whatsoever. And I just didn't want that.
I once accused him of the two cardinal sins, pride and despair, and he was guilty of both of them.
Yeah. But you got along really well with Jim. You were like...
We're 3,000 miles apart.
Yeah, that makes a difference. Yeah.
No, Bibi used to call me and tell me of the conversations. He said, I had a Krenov call. And,
Yeah.
He was unerring. The crate with the cabinet would be shipped from San Francisco to the end of the world and east end of Long Island. And just as the crate would arrive, actually just as it arrived, the phone would ring, and our manager, Diana, would say, "He's cranky." He wants to talk to you. Anyway, his is the voice, however, that I miss. We had wonderful, far-ranging conversations covering a lot of ground. Richard, I want to not preempt in any way your presentation, but we need to talk about this work and how the commission that you were obligated to accept from your former mother-in-law took you into a century, namely 18th century France, where, as I recall, because I think we were part of the travelers with you in that passage, you said you discovered some of the greatest furniture produced extant. And I remember some of your peers being actually mortified by your use of gold and ebony And you were largely unaffected because you had found something that very few others would understand. What keeps that body of work, that neoclassical work of yours, from not being reproduction furniture? Where is the creative aspect? What did you bring to it that made it yours?
It's hard to do this without a slide. I don't even know, how many of you actually know what I do.
Well,
I've been I've been under the radar for a while. But,
Yeah.
I mean, for those who don't know, I made stuff that was unabashedly neoclassical. And I'll tell the story of how I got into it, on my dime. So. Because I won't have anything left if I do it now.
Okay.
But the point is, in spite of myself, I discovered neoclassicism by making a piece, a commission, and it just opened up the world to me. I can't explain it. It was like, all of a sudden, it was like, wow, I never thought about this. So I went into it. And but what I did not do was copy anything. I was totally ignorant about historic furniture. When we went to school, there was no history of furniture. And how about that? So, and it probably still isn't. I mean, how many of you guys are in school or teachers? You got a history of furniture class? Do people know the real history of furniture? How can you make furniture without a history? But anyway, so, and had I made any historical furniture at RIT, I would have been asked to leave. It was forbidden. You couldn't. There was a guy there in my class, and he wanted to make reproduction stuff, and he didn't last at all. So there was a real animus against anything historical, although that's not true because it was perfectly okay to make furniture that was derivative of 20th century furniture, and that's historical. So, I mean, who drew the line? And Art Nouveau was okay, too, and then maybe a little Art Deco. So, where was that line drawn? Mm-hmm. But anyway, I wound up in 18th century France, I guess. And it wasn't, I didn't want to be that, and I didn't want to copy any of the stuff. You couldn't copy that stuff. It was just too spectacular. It would take a workshop full of, 25 different skills to put together pieces of that magnitude. I'm talking about museum quality furniture, not the country furniture, but court furniture, royal furniture. And I had no interest in copying it, and in fact, I knew that would be, not in my best interest. But what I wanted was a vocabulary. I was looking for a new vocabulary because this was no longer sculptural. It was a different game. And so I looked at the work and tried to understand what were they dealing with? What did neoclassicism really mean? I'm sure I slept through that part in the art history class. And so I realized it was about symmetry. It was about things that are derived from Greek and Roman architecture, columns and flutes and reeds and whatever. And then I started just doing my own thing. And so I never thought it was reproduction furniture, and nobody ever accused me of that. I mean, there were people who were ignorant wouldn't know, but anybody who knew what was going on knew it wasn't. But people were aghast. I mean, there was a review of one of the first tables I made. Somebody said that I had set the movement back 20 years, and I thought, great, that's negative time, So I don't know, and
As I recall, you were writing articles yourself under the name of Dick Lignum.
Yeah, after that review, I said, well, can I respond to this? And there was a publication that was written by that was put out by the Wendell Castle Workshop. Wendell had a school at that time, and the editor said, yeah, why don't you find somebody else to interview? And I said, yeah, I'll do that. And I invented a journalist. I called him Dick Lignum, and he was a jerk. There was no way around it. I had a good time with that. I may bring him back. I remember at the end, the little blurb. And it said Dick Lignum writes, on the world of wood. He's currently working on a screenplay based on the life of Pinocchio. But I didn't care. It's like, I don't know if I knew who my peers were. This was, right around the beginning, and And nobody said that to my face. That's the other thing. I didn't know they all hated me. Thanks for letting me know. But I remember the first, I sent a slide to Richard Kagan. Richard Kagan had a gallery in Philadelphia early on. Did he predate you guys?
Yes.
Yes. And he got this slide. He says, I don't know what to make of this. I wanted to put the piece in a show down there. And he said, I'm not really sure. And it took him about a month. And finally he said, I like this. And the other thing that had happened is when I was making the very first piece, which I was embarrassed by, Wendell had come in to my shop. I thought, oh shit, he's going to see it, And he picked up a leg and he said, these are great, And that was it. I said, okay, I don't have to worry about this anymore. So, and I've never been one to really worry about what anybody else thought. I was just, this was it. I was just doing it.
Brian, in your talk, you referred to that period of time, enviable, 10 years, in the late 90s, about 2007 or 8, when you lived and worked in Japan, and arguably you produced probably the best work you've ever done. Now, that many years later, the question is, can you tap into that flow of energy again? What do you think?
No way.
Pardon?
No, I can't. I had an inkling of this question before, and I've been trying to figure out what the answer is. That period was unique. That's over. There's no way. I'm not even expecting to get the same confluence of advantages that I had during that period. Because the person that I was during that time, it was a narcissistic period. It was self-centered, and it all got poured into the work. And the work is fine and everything; it's good pieces, but it didn't really lead to anywhere. The day-to-day life was imbalanced, and I just want a little more balance from life now that I'm 47 now, and I have less energy. So I'll never be able to get to that stage where I can do 7 days and always thinking that this is the greatest stuff in the universe, because doubt comes in. So there's two things. I have less energy and more doubt. And I have more adult infrastructure to support at this stage, because you have to grow up, And so I'm at the time when the overhead goes up and the energy goes down and the doubt increases, all these things, that's who I am right now. So I piddle around with these small ebony things, I guess, and that's supposed to be the gateway to something else. But there's no way that 10-year period can be reproduced. Now, if suddenly you get rich, even if I suddenly got rich, okay, that's a great question. What are you going to do when you get rich? You're going to keep going and do exactly what you were doing? I'm not sure. I have pieces in my mind which are sort of half, they're just chunks of this and that, but the ignition switch is broken at this point, for whatever reason it could be. And I was sad about that. I was terrified about that for a long time, but I just want to accept it, because this is balance. Now.
Well, are there any artists who got rich and then produced anything worthwhile? Does that ever happen, actually?
Picasso did really well. He was a millionaire by the time he was like 35, and it didn't hurt him at all. And then you got Jeff Koons, who was a millionaire by the time he was 20, and he's worthless.
There we go.
Just a scumbag.
But Picasso's, you talk about a narcissist and an egotist.
Well, that's what it takes. The star system is all of it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
It's the star system. So all those ambitions, that kept me going during that 10-year period of glory and everything, there was in the back of my mind the payoff, which was to, I don't know, to be a part of that, to be more like Jeff, my boy Jeff Koons or whatever, to be...
You should have married a porn star there instead of a woman with properties.
It took me a long time and several parties in Manhattan at artist places to understand that you don't want to be around those people in the first place. And if there's any of you here right now, then forgive me, but I have to be honest. They're not human beings in the normal sense. So, I mean, you go and you get the list in the first 5 minutes of everybody they know. You meet them at the party, you know, and then they look at your shoes and they're gone. That's it. But you don't want to have to live your life to please those people. It's not worth it. And I thought it was. During that 10-year period, I make things because the pieces need to be made, and also because I want people to approve of them. You know, big need for approval. So I had you to approve. That was the first step. But then all the people who meant anything in the world, who were not born of the cornfield, you know, all those things that I had in my mind, that was going to come through these pieces of furniture. And now it's like, whoa, you were such an idiot to think of that. Furniture, or whatever I end up making, has to take place for itself. It has to be completely removed from money, and for me, it can't be connected at all. I tried to put those together.
Brian, wait.
Yes.
What about relevance? I mean, what you and Richard make they have such an ephemeral value, even in terms of utility. How can you really justify what you do when there's only a small group of people? Hank Gilpin calls them hobbyists, and the whole thing is supported by this.
He's talking about the artists or the...
No, he's talking about the
collectors.
Yeah, who have, and Richard would know this very, very well, especially, I think, the small group of people who have the same hobby as what you make. But when they move on to a new hobby, what's left? So my question is, wouldn't you be better off having made things that people in your community, the dentist, the lawyer, the doctor, the teacher, could use and buy and use, rather than going off to these faraway markets, shipping things 3,000 miles away?
Oh, that's so quaint.
When you
That's
say
so
better
quaint.
off, you mean financially?
In every way,
In every way?
yeah. Except the one way that I know you're going to talk about.
I don't know.
So that's banned. Don't talk about that.
I don't know it. Well, I originally intended to do that, I think. I mean, when I started making furniture, it wasn't like I'm going to make furniture nobody can fucking afford. You know, it's like that wasn't my business plan. So I did. I made, and you know, I mean, I would trade. I traded, you know, with my dentist for a root canal and a crown, which just fell out. And watch out, Brian. This is where it goes.
I pay with ebony. I walked into my dentist friend's office the other day. I said, "You guys take ebony for payment?" And the receptionist said, "Of course."
Yeah. That's because you live in California, man. So, but no, I that's what I set out to do. But then the work takes you. You know, it's like I didn't have a business plan. I didn't even know what a business plan was, and I didn't have a career plan because I didn't have a mentor either. I studied with some really interesting people, and I learned a lot, as much as what I didn't want to be is what I did want to be, and each one had something to offer, either aesthetically or technically. But nobody ever said to me, "Here's how it's going to work. You're going to start off at this point, and then you're going to pay some dues, and then things are going to start to roll, and then things are going to get interesting, and you're going to have a flush period, and it's going to last for so long, and that's when you want to start saving money, and then you have to think about how to age." Nobody ever said anything to me. It was like, no, they didn't talk to me. You know, those guys just were interested in their own work mostly. I mean, Jerry was a good teacher, but you know, they weren't mentors, so there was no clue. So all I knew how to do was just do what I did, and I've always been impulsive and you know, it's kind of maybe spoiled, and I just did what interested me. I let the muse pull me, and it would jerk me around like crazy, but I just, whatever, and the work would open up. Every piece I made would suggest something new, and then I would want to explore this, I'd want to explore that. I'd hear ba-doom, ba-doom, and all of a sudden there I was. And never intentional, probably not a good idea. in terms of finances. Certainly not good for relationships, I'll say that. And so I never thought that way.
Well, you're 20 years older than Brian. So, I mean, don't you recognize where he's at this point in his artistic life, the crossroads?
It's different. I think it's different for everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
we all, what happened to me is very different. I'm not making furniture anymore. I don't know if you guys know that, but
You're going to tell us why?
what?
Will you tell us why?
In my
Okay.
spiel, it's complex. I mean, I burned out, and then other things opened up. The same way that paths opened for me, other paths opened for me when furniture was just like dead for me. You know, I got ruined by money, I think. I mean, you know, be honest. I mean, I had a one-man show at the Peter Joseph Gallery. It left me ill physically and spiritually. I never recovered from it because of the money that was involved, the bad energy. It was not a good time, you know. I mean, it was like things went to the dark side. I mean, you know, people always say, woodworkers are such nice people. They're great people. Why is that? It's because there's no friggin' money involved. There's no money. If there was money, we'd be like killing each other, you know? Or it would attract assholes. I don't know which. What was the question?
That's why you're so far better off, Brian, than Jeff Koons. It's much better place.
Yeah, I pieced that one
You
together.
don't want to make, you know.
Yeah, I got that now.
Well, I guess we want to get to some questions, but I have just one last one, and it has to do with the world of art. We live in a literary world, a world in which the word is really more valued than the act, the deed. So it's concept over construction. And I think it's a world in which art thrives and craft much less so. Is there really possibly an authentic discourse on craft that can take place, do you think? And also, as far as studio furniture, this phase of the American studio furniture movement, what's your feeling about the future? Richard?
Oh,
You were dozing.
no, I wasn't dozing at all. I was thinking how glad I was that it was Brian that was going to have to answer that. I don't have a clue. I'll be honest with you, I don't have a clue. The world is weird. I mean, you know, the difference in the world from the 60s to now, unbelievable. The 80s to now, unbelievable. This is a strange time to be alive, I think. Or maybe it's not. Maybe life has always been this way. Things change, and as you get older, the change becomes scarier and more frightening. But things run a course. There will always be craft, whatever that means. Studio furniture, I never knew what that really meant. I thought the whole studio furniture concept was an attempt to remove furniture making from the world of the decorative arts, where it's always been and
Yes.
belongs, and bring it into the world of the arts,
Yes.
where it will never be.
That's right.
So-
It's what Tom Hucker says so beautifully. It's like trying to make a chocolate cake with no chocolate. You
Yeah.
mix it, but you ain't ever going to get
Yeah.
a chocolate cake.
It's not going to work. I
No.
mean, you know, we used to talk about like cooking food that was the equivalent of contemporary arts, you know, and it would be like, you know, escalloped potatoes with fecal sauce, and you know, shrimp with barbed wire. I mean, nobody's going to eat that stuff, and nobody wants to sit on that stuff either. So, sorry. Thank you. There will always be furniture. people need furniture. There'll always be furniture.
Yeah.
How it will be marketed, I don't know. I don't have a clue. And I would never have had a clue if you guys hadn't come along, I'm sure. But, and who will make it? You guys are making it. Well, I got to say, one of the best things about being here is seeing all the young people.
Yes.
And seeing your work last night with the slide wars. I wish there had been a more serious way to actually look at your work. But to see the enthusiasm and the creativity and the energy, and none of you look like you're going, oh dear, it's all over, it's terrible, it's terrible. You know, you're all for it, and you're going to find your way. You're going to make it happen. When I started off, there was nothing happening either. And we made it happen, and it happened in a certain way, and then as everything does, it became corrupted. I mean, everything, it's funny, everything has this
called the
this
dialectic,
loop.
yeah.
So there will always be something. I don't know what it will be called, but people will be making stuff. I mean, what we will be doing again, I don't know. You know, I mean, I look at Brian's work and I'm astonished. Nobody should ever expect to be able to make that much beautiful furniture. That's what I felt. I thought, this is incredible. I don't know how you did this. And if you never make another piece again, as far as I'm concerned, you shouldn't worry about that, even though I know that's not what's going to happen.
I'm worrying less.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it. But so I don't know what the answer to that is. I won't know until it happens. I've never been one to like. I mean, I kind of was lucky. I feel like somehow or other, I sensed or experienced things just a little before most other people did. So I got into woodworking when it was still a pretty difficult thing to do, and I got into other things. I mean, we'll talk about that later. But I was always a little just like on the tip of the wave somehow or other. And so I'm waiting for the next wave, whatever it may be for me, and it maybe there isn't one. Maybe I've had my waves. I'm not really sure, but they're out there for everybody else, I'm sure. But I don't know what's coming. What do you think?
I think that I'm optimistic about an expanding pool of buyers of what we make, because I mean, if only because of the cycle of what humans like at any given time, and it changes. And I look at art and hate it and see it can only, for normal people, it's the farthest thing from, you can't like it. It seems fine art the way it's practiced, maybe not painting, but fine art the way it's practiced is such a put off for normal people, for anybody who doesn't want to invest like a ton. It's just it's a big stop sign for normal people. Like, oh, you don't understand this jar of urine, you know? And it's like, and it can only go.
But you can sit on it.
You can only go so far, and things have to start to flip back the other direction. And it will. Young people still like to make things. They have to be trained to do so, and they have to make some sacrifices. But I think at some time, people get sick of having junk around, and then they want something which is better, and then there'll be increased buyers. Our little rarefied world, this group of clients that you cultivated over 35 years, it was a wonderful thing. And I don't know if that's going to be replaced, and I don't know what the model is for selling. For me personally, it's I'll make things, and it might even be like new pieces which are like with the same enthusiasm and complexity as the old pieces, the pieces that you just saw if you're here. I might make those, but all circumstances in the rest of life have to allow that, because I'm a guilty person by nature, apologizing constantly. And if there's not enough money coming in, and if everything else now in my life is not settled, then I can't do it. But if it's settled and I have a safe place, I probably will. I make things now. I still have strength in my hands. I can't see as well as I used to, but there's still some power. It's just, it's all mental at this point. There needs to be a little more money to bring the safe place, and then the ideas can start to go. But it won't happen otherwise. So me personally, I'm feeling fairly optimistic. You know, I'll make some stuff. I don't know when.
That's the best we can hear?
Yeah, yeah. The one thing I would add, if you're talking about is there a future for craft, when I started off, there were no galleries. I mean, maybe there was America House and Shop One, but they were, you know, they were like gift stores, really. There were no galleries. And so what we did was custom furniture, and that's all we expected to do. We were hoping that we would make furniture for people who would pay us, and they did. And some people had more money than other people, and some people were more adventuresome in their taste. And from what I'm hearing, that still goes on. I mean, I'm hearing that people are getting commissions. You talk to people, and they say, well, I've got commission work, you know, there's the gallery, nothing happened with the galleries. It doesn't need to be, I mean, not to attack your whole existence, but it doesn't need to be a gallery paradigm.
Absolutely.
And,
I don't think
and maybe that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, no, I don't think studio furniture makers have really supported a gallery system in the same way that the students going through art school. I mean, the whole deal when you finish art school is to get a gallery, preferably in New York, but if you have to work to, you know, your way to New York, but it's really part of the culture of the artist is to get a gallery. It's not at all the case, it seems to me, and it's still an odd thing after all these years to have a piece of furniture being made that can't find a home, a place closer to where the maker, the artisan lives. And I think there's a real danger in that. And if I were a young person starting out wanting to make furniture, just simply to make objects, have a strong foundation, center yourself, and be sure that the work that you make, I like to listen to what other people say about pieces. We get a new Newell piece, and we've got a mover. You know, he's a mover, he's a guy. I said, what do you think of that piece? You know, and then you talk, and I figure if he can't tell me, he scratches his head and backs off, well, then I think we might have a problem, because I feel furniture, what really anchors furniture, in addition to the beauty of utility, is the fact that people can understand it. You talked about that. I remember years ago and others have, it's a taming aesthetic. It still, you know, is something that needs to be used and shared by others, where I often wonder, and had these conversations with Brian, what artists are doing. Are they just playing with themselves in the studio? Because the things that come out that bear no relationship to any life or any experience I've ever had.
I'm sorry, Amy.
Anyway, it's probably time for some questions.
Yeah, questions.
Yeah, we can. Yes, Alf.
Just to follow your comment through, and Brian is really involved in this, frankly. But I think the current discussion, and I'm not leveling this at anybody in the room, but just the current general discussion that's going on right now about will craft survive is so typical of the kind of arrogance that has caused these modern artistic charlatans to think that they've done something so revolutionary that they're going to forever change the human impulse to make things that are both beautiful and functional is just ridiculous. The human spirit is going to continue to make things that are both functional and yet beautiful. And just because the black-collar crowd is currently saying we've done away with that, it's almost ridiculous to just continue to indulge them in that discussion. Let's just go away. Just go retreat into your own little galleries and let us make stuff. We just want to make stuff.
That's kind of short-sighted, though, don't you think? I mean, there's always going to be, there's got to be a black-collar crowd. I'd never heard that before, but I think I know who you mean. There's got to be room for everybody. I mean, there's got to be room for everybody. The important thing is that that no one feels second-rate or less important for taking their particular route. I have as much respect for a person who does excellent reproduction work, or somebody who repairs furniture, as I do for any sculptor or artist. I have the same respect for a really great chef. It's all equally good. I think everybody finds their own way. You find your own route. The important thing is that everybody have that chance in some way to shine. And if you've got the balls, and I refer to the women who mostly have them these days, do it. Don't be afraid. And we didn't touch on this, but this was supposed to be about extreme furniture. And what makes furniture extreme is having a certain sort of energy, a certain sort of juice that pushes you, that doesn't permit you to do anything else. It just doesn't even occur to you that this isn't what you're supposed to do. It's like, this is what I'm going to do, and I don't care what I have to do it. I'm going to do it. If I have to go out and get another job, if I have to borrow a lot of money, if I have to eat hot dogs and beans, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to make this work. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it my way, and I'm not going to compromise my vision. That's what extreme furniture is to me. That's what makes people accomplish. It's costly. It's very costly. You have to give things up to do that. But that's what I think it takes, and it takes it in any field. And you can see people who succeed are not always well-balanced individuals. They're not always pleasant to be with, usually not. But that's what I think it takes. And so long as there are people who are willing to do that, we're always going to have furniture, and they're going to find a way.
I agree, it's elemental. Any other?
One thing to that, what you're saying. I think I agree with everything you said there. And I think all of us who've worked at our craft for a long period of time, we can't help but then start to compare ourselves to those people who have real money, because they are the ones who can afford our work. And now we feel marginalized because they have the money. They could buy anything of ours, but we can't have what they already have. And
They can't have what you have.
I know, but we still, in our own mind, I think somehow, maybe this is just my mind, but I still feel less.
Well, we've had people come in, Preetam and Eames, and they've said, this isn't furniture, this is art. And to borrow a Krenov phrase, there is such lost energy when I hear that, as if that sticker provides valid. I so agree with what Richard is saying. The differences are so important. They need to be cherished. And the difference between what Jeff Koons is doing and Brian Newell is doing, all of that needs to be done. And you know what? It will be done. You can't thwart it.
It's a function of the time that you live in. There was a time, when the furniture maker was a star. We were talking about this earlier. A piece of furniture was made for the court of the king, and they paraded it through the streets, and people came out to cheer, and it was important. And the painters were just flunkies who were decorating the walls. I mean, it was a different time. Let's get back to that. That's what I say. But all humor aside, Michael just said something extremely powerful. And I think both Brian and I are very similar. There's something about wealth that we all crave or desire, or I don't know, we don't crave or desire, but somehow we feel just a little bit less for not being wealthy. And I don't know what that is. It comes from way back, I'm sure. And it might be part of the energy, part of the power that makes us do what we do to try to compensate. Are we all compensating for? Remember, in Citizen Kane, it was Rosebud. It's like, so I don't know what we do about that.
What's wealth? I think that's the critical thing here. We're talking about cash, or are we talking about personal wealth? And what I'm looking at is personal wealth, which is what's inside you, what you've achieved, the goals you've set for your life, and have you achieved those goals? Have you achieved them with personal success?
Yeah.
Do you have a house to live in? Do you have a bicycle to ride around? Do you have maybe a kayak, or I don't know what it is, maybe a little rowboat? It doesn't matter the cash value.
Yeah.
We got to get over that bullshit.
Absolutely.
And we've got to get to the stage where we're saying, what's in it, what's in my life that makes me feel good?
Yeah, well, it's easier to do after about $50,000 a year. I mean, I'm not denying that many wealthy people are not human, but I'm just saying that the luxury of all these questions only comes into play around, depending on where you're at, 45, 50. Like, give me $50,000 a year, and I'll make some furniture. I won't do commissions.
Well, no,
but-
Richard had that experience, didn't you, Richard?
No, he was getting 200, I think, at the time.
No, I mean, did I ever make that much money?
No,
Yeah,
you
no, it
didn't.
doesn't.
No.
The money is meaningless. First off, I mean, I dealt with a lot of wealthy people. I never saw a one who I thought was any happier than I was. No.
No, I
They
don't
have
deny
all the-
that.
I mean,
But I've seen a lot of poor people who are totally miserable, and they don't have the luxury to even think about, it's always a choice. It's always a choice. Am I going to be able to get groceries this week, or is my rent going to be late? And that's the level at which you destroy everything. Every sense of creativity, every little impulse you have is like, right. You're gonna make something pretty, and we're at that level. Many years I'm so far below that level that, and that's so. I mean, cash is irrelevant, but it's not. It's irrelevant after. It's like there's a name of a book called Enough. It's like an anecdote that says, well, I have. Anyway, if you have enough, but enough starts at a certain low level, and if you're anxious all the time, anxiety eats creativity. Those two things just kill each other. So forget it. Some people can thrive on it, but give me the income and the free time, and that's luxury. It's really luxury. We had luxury for a while, but on the other hand, it doesn't take very many buyers to just a few. Give me 4 buyers, and that'll take up my whole year's worth of making. It just takes like a few people to support you.
It actually only takes one.
It does.
You're completely right, Ron, except that you continue to see great stuff come out of incredibly deprived communities. Not a lot of it, but frankly, we don't represent a large percentage of the population anyhow, whatever economic strategy we come out of. The people who are driven to do something will do it whether or not their economic status supports it. The so-called, in fact, since I've been so dismissive of the black collar crowd, I like to point out that they call this art outsider art because it didn't originate from within the gallery world, but it's made by frequently extremely impoverished people who are just so driven by their vision. There was a fellow in Nashville who his whole life he was never appreciated an ounce. He was a poor black man who sculpted limestone and gave it to all his friends. And it wasn't until right before he died, people started to recognize the incredible brilliance of what this man had done. And the rich people in town started to go around to the poor parts of town and said, I like that rock you've got on your porch. I'll give you $150 for that. And at this point now, William Edmonds' stuff is selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars and going into museums around the world. Well, he was always on the verge of starvation, but he had to do it. He absolutely had to do it. And same guy with that guy was my Alzheimer's one. The guy from Georgia who did the art with the spiraling Bible scriptures, and it's, I want to say Spinster, but Finster, right? Finster. Same deal, same deal.
Yeah.
And the guy who built Watts Tower.
I suppose that's where I would like to go myself, to a place where I can either give the stuff to my friends, or, I mean, it doesn't, the work itself will be as it needs to be, like it always was, but disconnected from having to go anywhere. You know? In the first place, I can't picture a lot of my stuff in a house. It was always just made, it's furniture, but I can't ever, I don't really care that much where it goes after it leaves my shop, because it's just got to get out of the way for the next one. But I think that spirit of making the thing strictly for its own sake, and the money comes totally from somewhere else, I would like to get to that point, and not have even a single conversation about how much did I get for that, or you know, how much did I not get for that. I don't know if it's possible. I'm trying to set it up, but I admire that. That's purity. It's truly pure, and we try to get there.
I don't think it would be possible to do the sort of work that you do that way. I think that to do the sort of stuff you did and the sort of stuff I did, you have to work full time. I don't think you can have a day job. I don't think it's something you can come to after, 40 hours a week doing something else.
Oh, no, there would be, it's not that. I'm talking about, like...
Being a different person.
Miracle money, I guess. Something I think. Just, it's just a dream.
Dollar in a dream.
I think the answer is going to be different, or the formula is going to be a little different for everybody in the room. What you make, how you want to make it, how you're going to sell it, and satisfy yourself creatively and aesthetically, but have that, what did the guy say in that one book, have that Buddhistic calm from money in the bank, So.
What was that? I didn't hear what you...
There's a Buddhistic calm that comes from money in the bank.
I'm practicing that religion. Yeah. Any other questions? Something completely
Comments?
unrelated to money? Yeah. Oh. Hi. I like that table you showed last night. Is that for sale? Okay. Oh, yeah.
But I guess my question was, Judy McKee was talking about sort of a strategy of making objects that that she could live with. That she said, if she couldn't live with it, why should anybody else live with it? So I was just kind of curious about your own work, and it's this extreme furniture topic. I mean, do you like having your own work around you? Do you like living with it in your home, or do you ever? I know we all have those things that we stay with us in our the pieces that don't sell or don't find a home. But do you enjoy that? Do you like having your own work with you?
I don't really have any of my own work. I mean, for a while I was selling everything that I made, and I would want to keep something for myself, and then it would go. But I wasn't making furniture for anybody like me. I was making court furniture. I was making stuff, to go into a different lifestyle. And my wife didn't. My ex-wife, it didn't fit with all her furniture. She wouldn't let me bring it home. So what I have at home is some of the stuff I made when I was a student at RIT. And I have my banjos, and I love those. And there's a few early pieces, but I don't live like that. I mean, people think, they look at my work and they think, oh, Rick, what's Rick?
Oh, yeah.
What?
What?
The journalist, Rick, the editor, Rick.
Oh, Mistelli?
Yeah, right. I met Rick Mistelli, and he said, well, I thought you'd be wearing silk pantaloons. I mean, people think... The work I made doesn't reflect me at all. It reflects me totally, but not that way. So I was making work for the wealthy. I'm not wealthy.
Yeah, me too. And that all ties into where I come from, because that's where the work, but for me, it's uncomfortable to live with my own stuff, especially since it's really impractical. I mean, if I have a desk still from a while ago, and I was going to give it away because I just don't want to be reminded of that period. And,
I always thought the people who had a lot of their work at home with the teachers and the professors.
And the people who love themselves very much, and we don't have that problem. But no, I mean, there's something about being surrounded by your own work. It's just a little bit weird to me. Like, oh, I made that, and then I made that too. It's weird. I want to exchange that for money and then buy Andy's table.
Yeah.
That's the goal for this year.
I have mostly, and this is the absolute truth, I have mostly furniture that was discarded by other people. I've got like my sister's old couch, and I've got like a table that belonged to my grandmother, and then I have a bunch of chairs that were school chairs, like in the 40s, those sturdy Grand Rapids chairs, and that's the way I live. My indulgence is in the shop. There I indulge, but
it's
at
the
home,
making. Yeah, it's to live with the object. The object to me is almost a byproduct in a way of a process, which is the daily work, which is hopefully exciting and satisfying. The thing that comes from it is important, but not to me that much. I'm not a fetishist of my own work, and I've seen enough of that to really. It's just like you see people just clinging to it. Not for sale. It's not for sale. God, move on.
I could live with Andy's work, though.
It's just my opinion, though.
I could live with Andy's work because Andy's work is friendly. There's not a hostile bone in his body of work. I mean, it's different. My stuff scares me. What's that?
The kind of mind that it had to come from.
Yeah, I don't need to be reminded of that.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Come on.
Thank you.
I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. Neither of us would have had the kind of careers that they had we've had without Bibi and Warren. So
Oh, yeah.
we got to thank them for this. Would have never happened.